Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for Before the Storm, our Gulf-wide StormSmart training exercises. Now, before we get too far into this, we've got a great session for you, but I do want to go through a few quick housekeeping. But because of the great turnout that we've been having, it's not possible for us to respond to everybody's questions as they come up throughout the presentation. So what we're going to do instead is use the built-in tools that you're probably familiar with that come with the program you're using right now to view the webinar. Over in the right-hand corner of your screen, you'll probably see a little window that looks something like what you can see up on the screen now. If you click on that there, you can type your questions in, and we will have a question answering session at the very end of the presentation. So if you type them in now, if you're having any sort of mechanical problems with connecting or whatever else, please put those in there, and we'll address those right away. Otherwise, we will get to those questions right at the end of the session. So once again, welcome to the StormSmart Coast training. My name is Wesley Shaw. I'm the lead developer for StormSmart Coast, and it's a great pleasure to have you here. With these 4 Gulf-wide coastal storms planning, response, and recovery training sessions, we're hoping that we'll give you some great information and allow you to really get going and helping to protect communities from storms, floods, sea level rise, and climate change, which is the goal of StormSmart Coast. We want to identify a couple things here, two main things. Number one, we want to give you information about existing, we want to give you information directly. So what's out there already, what can we tell you about it, and directly convey that information. We also want to make sure that you have a good idea of what sort of tools are out there that we can't tell you about in great detail right now because perhaps they're very specific to your particular area and you're going to need to look at them community by community. Also, there's always new stuff coming out, and we want to make sure that we have you tap into all those the best sources of information that will continue to come out with more and more tools as we move forward. Our hope is that with this information, you'll be in a better position to help your community plan for and implement strategies to enhance resiliency, create more sustainable communities physically and financially, and, of course, reduce harm to people, property, and community resources. That's ever popular last one. And we will talk about funding during some of the sessions. One more quick thing before we jump right in. During some of the slides, you'll see a little green box that looks like what you can see up on the screen now. This is an indication that the activity that's being discussed is eligible for credit under the Community Rating System, or CRS. Those of you who aren't familiar with the CRS, it's part of the National Flood Insurance Program, which is administered by FEMA. The goal of the CRS is to provide incentives for communities to go above and beyond the minimum national requirements of the NFIP. If communities do that, they can gain points. These points can translate into insurance reductions for community-wide for everybody's flood insurance premium. It's a really neat program. Some of you may know that it's going through a major rewrite right now, and that's coming together and should be wrapping up. We're getting sort of the middle of the year. The points that you see up on the screen are how these activities would be scored under the old system, but we will certainly update them on the StormSmart Coast site as those new points come out. So if you're not familiar with the CRS, there's a section on it on the StormSmart Coast state site. There's also detailed information on the changes coming to it at crs2012.org. See that URL there on the screen. This is an overview of the 4 different training sessions that are Gulf-wide. These are all brought to you by the Gulf of Mexico Alliance, or GOMA. It's a great organization that's doing a lot to help the Gulf Coast. You can see the first one. Today we're going to be talking about sort of resources and identifying hazards and what sort of risks you're facing and learn more about those risks. In the second one, which will be on March 8th, we will talk about planning and regulation. This is the second part of the Before the Storm section. The third part of the Before the Storm section is on March 22nd, where we'll look in more detail at mitigation, infrastructure, training and outreach, and emergency services. That last chunk, emergency services, might get bumped into the April 5th one, depending on how the timing works out. We do have a lot of information we'd like to convey, and it fits in with that last one because the last one we're really talking about what to do during and after a storm event. So the emergency services obviously play into that very well. You can see they happen every other Tuesday. After we finish the last of those, there's a 2-week gap. Then we will be having a series of statewide, state-specific webinars, which will hopefully give us a chance to sit down and address the specific needs of individual states. Since we realize while you all share a similar Gulf Coast, that's both the physical and the legal and the political atmosphere, all those things change from state to state. So we want to give you a chance to ask questions to experts that we'll be gathering together. Speaking of that, We do have some great guest lectures set up for later webinars, so please do join us, and also we'll make sure you know how to find out more information as we get a little further into today's talk. And this is today's talk. Two main things: figuring out what trends, trying to get a handle on what your risks are, what your community is facing. In general, just general scope, identifying, okay, we are subject to this sort of thing and this sort of thing and not that one. And then after that, we want to talk more about the specific hazards that Gulf Coast communities often face. Before we get into that, though, I want to quickly talk about the StormSmart Coast tools. Well, this might even be more properly called the toolkit. The StormSmart Coast, as I mentioned, started off several years ago thanks to a NOAA Coastal Management Fellowship, and it's branched out with NOAA support since then, and support from the EPA and the Gulf of Mexico Alliance and many, many other groups. And it's an attempt to gather together all the sorts of resources that a community might want as they try to figure out how to grapple with coastal hazards. The main website is found here at StormSmartCoast.org. I have a number of slides here, but I think I'm going to push my luck a little bit here because it won't be audio, and let's take a look at it live online. If you go to StormSmartCoast.org, you end up on a page that looks something like this. On it, you can see there are various different states that are participating. The orange states have active StormSmart Coast sites. You can see that covers the whole entire Gulf of Mexico. New England's in the works, Delaware's en route, and there are several other states that are working towards getting state sites up relatively soon. You can click on any one of the states, or you can also pull from this menu right over here. Take a look at Mississippi. If we click on the Mississippi page, this is the whole site dedicated to Mississippi. And you can see at top here the general ordinance. We have the home section, which has information on the community rating system, no adverse impact, and legal stuff. We'll be talking about all of that either in our future one. The before the storm section is where we'll be spending most of our talk today. And you can see if you compare this to the table, the talks really are organized around the website organization. The during the storm and after the storm stuff we covered in that last webinar in the series. And finally, I just really want to quickly point out this funding section, which is important for a lot of different things. It gets to be pretty handy to have some sort of resources to use because not everything you can do is free. And while we won't have a whole session dedicated to it, this resource is something you should know about, and we will definitely be referring to it throughout the different talks. Just as a quick example, if you click on one of the resources on here, the zero ones, it will pull up eventually. Okay, looks like the site's going to stutter along here for a second. Probably too many of us looking at it at once. But it quickly pulls up a summary of what that resource offers and tells you where to find more information and when the process starts and everything else. So it's really handy that way. The last tab, I'm trying to point out here, is the StormSmart Connect. Give this one just a second to load. The StormSmart is our professional networking site, and Margaret mentioned that it's somewhat like Facebook if you use Facebook in your off time, of course. This is a similar way that one can interact with other people, but these are primarily people within your field. And you can see the tabs across the top here. Again, sort of lay out the general organization. This members tab will show you who participates in StormSmart Coast, and as of this morning, we have about 806 people spread all over the nation. You can zoom in on the map and see who's where. I'll quickly, if you're interested in finding people from your own state, you can connect with, again, like LinkedIn. Click on Mississippi here, and I'm just going to hit search, and this will pull up all of the members from Mississippi. And looks like we've got a fairly good group of you from Mississippi on board. So again, a great spot to find other people working in a similar field to you, and it helps you collaborate with them too. The group is pretty much what it sounds like. You can form groups with other people who are participating in these efforts around the country and some around the world. I'll talk about a specific group in a second that we set up for this webinar. The calendar has events that are happening around the country. You can see our training sessions are on here. Also available are different talks around the country. So it's a place you can schedule calls and whatever else. And if you have an event you would like to promote, you can either hit this Create Event button up here, and it walks you through a really simple process of adding your event to the calendar. Or if that seems intimidating, you're more than welcome to email me directly. Speaking of that, you want to contact anybody on here. Let's say, for example, I want to contact, this is Tracy Sempier from Mississippi, Alabama Sea Grant. If I click on her face, I can hit send a private message, and it pulls up again, very similar to Facebook. I can send her a message to have her email address or anything else. It's a really easy way to reach out to other people. The StormSmart training has the information on the webinars like the one you're participating in today. This first one here, you can see it signed up. And this button right here will allow you to go over and join our that we're pulling together for participants in this webinar. And the questions which we might not get to today, we'll host here, and we will provide answers to them to the best of our ability. And we're also hoping those of you who join us on the group, if you have expertise and know these things, we know we have, for example, a bunch of people on the line from FEMA and from other federal agencies, and also people from the state level who really have good ideas about what's going on. That's it's an easy way to do that here. You can do it in the forum section here. You can ask your question or whatever else, and we'll be keeping careful tabs on it. If you have any problems, again, don't hesitate to click on my face and send me a message, and we'll get you all stuff. So I'm going to stop there with StormSmart Coast. That's a whole presentation in and of itself. But I want to leap back and skip to these slides real quick, except for this one. I do want to make a quick note about the community rating system because it does show up throughout our presentations. You'll see this green box here where it says up to 50 points. That is how many points you could earn for just doing these sorts of activities that we described that would work towards CRS credit. Now, the community rating system, for those of you who don't know about it, is a part of the National Flood Insurance Program, and it's an incentive program to encourage communities to go above and beyond the minimum standards set by the National Flood Insurance Program. So if, for example, the National Flood Insurance Program says you have to build your first floor at base flood elevation or exactly at that base flood elevation, if you require everybody in your community to build a foot higher than that or 2 feet higher than that or 3 feet higher than that, you accumulate points. And those points can be translated into reductions in everybody's flood insurance premiums across your whole entire community. There's a little table down there that will give you an idea about how this can work out. But there is one community that is earning a 45% discount on every flood insurance premium in the whole entire community, which for those of you in coastal areas, you know that can add up to a lot of money really quickly. So watch for those green tabs. Those exist also throughout the website. Those of you who are intimately familiar with the CRS may know that it's currently going through a rather substantial revision. That's the biggest one that's happened in the program's 20-year history. And some of these points will be changing. The green icons right now show current points awarded for that. So it's not, it's certainly active right now and it's accurate right now. As these new changes roll out over the next several years, that will change, and we will certainly keep the website up to date. If you want direct information and detailed information on what's going on with the update, please check out crs2012.org. It has all the information you could ever want on what's changing and more. All right, with that, let's talk about how to get a handle on what your community's risks are. So rather than getting caught in the weeds right away, we want to step back and look community-wide and try to figure out what's happening. So there are a bunch of different things. I'm going to talk about a few today. The one I want to focus on right now is the Coastal Resilience Index, which was put together by Mississippi Alabama Sea Grant. It's a really great tool. It's a very simple tool, which is what makes it nice. It's essentially a downloadable PDF, and you can fill out the different tables, and you score yourself at the end. That said, it's designed really to work with a facilitator, and that is something that Mississippi Alabama Sea Grant is happy to provide, and they've been training facilitators all up and down the Gulf Coast, and last check they had well over 50 who will come to your community and help you walk through the steps that will help you identify weaknesses that your community might have that you might not have thought of earlier. Now, one great thing about this is that it encourages a collaborative approach to looking at your hazards. So it's not just one person sitting down and doing it. It's designed to have different representatives from different parts of your community, especially different agencies within your community and offices. So people who know about stormwater management are there, and the people who know about public outreach are there, and perhaps some elected official types are there. So you get everybody down and really, really start to get a handle on what's going on in your community. One tool which I want to highlight here real quickly that they put together with the NOAA Coastal Services Center is this critical facilities tool, which is neat. So if you go over to the page, and I should note here, we will have links available for you on that StormSmart Index group. So if you join there, we'll post the PowerPoint presentation and all the links so you can you don't have to try to scribble down all these links that they flash by you on the screen. But say we want to take a quick look at Mississippi, what critical facilities are exposed in Biloxi. you click on that, the site will look, and it will provide, so downloading the data right now, and you'll start to see these things appear on your screen. But you see what it records on the right side there with the legend there. And it's a neat way to find out, okay, I know this area floods, what's in there? Okay, here's what's in there. So it's a handy and really easy way and a neat way to do that. If you want to access the Coastal Resilience Index, you can download it at the URL we have here. Again, this will all be provided later. There's also a direct link to request a facilitator. If you decide, okay, hey, we want to go with this, what happens is they come out at some time you determine. You say, hey, it would be best for us to get together on a Wednesday at 2, how about this coming Wednesday or 2 months from now? They will come out and help your community walk through all this. So it's a very, it's an all-inclusive package, and it's just a neat tool. Of course, it's free for everybody as well. If you want more information, there's Tracy's email address is here, but you can also find more information on any of these websites about how to contact people. So in almost any risk management plan that your community is doing, is going to be figuring out which areas flood and which areas don't flood. And the flood insurance rate maps that are part of the National Flood Insurance Program and the flood insurance reports that go with them are probably going to be a big part of that effort. Now, flood insurance rate maps, what they generally do is delineate areas that flood during a what's either called a 100-year event or a 1% storm. The idea here is that it's a storm that has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. This certainly confuses the general public a lot. I'm sure most of you have run into this. You see it in the news often where communities, they interview people on the news saying, I can't believe it's not possible that we can't have 2 100-year events within 5 years. That's not possible, when statistically, of course, it is possible. Not terribly likely, but you can see down there that bullet point at the bottom, which says statistically there's a 26% chance of a 100-year storm event happening during an average 30-year mortgage. So there's a pretty good chance, if you are in the floodplain, that the area around you is going to flood. Hopefully your house is high enough that it will be safe. FEMA, as you may know, is doing some work to upgrade maps. They're constantly upgrading maps. Those of you in the Gulf in general have often seen newer maps than a lot of other parts of the country. The current effort right now is called Risk Map, which is a continuation of the map mod efforts, or map modernization efforts that you've probably heard about. The idea here is that they're really trying to get, FEMA's trying to partner more closely with communities and have those sorts of connections really early on. They want to work with people, they want to talk to communities before they start the mapping efforts, and then they want to work with them through the mapping efforts, and then they want to help them roll out the effort, the outreach, and they want to roll out the map afterwards with outreach tools and decision support tools. It's a really neat effort. To tell you the truth, I haven't been able to find a whole lot of detailed information about it online, and the FEMA people I've talked to, it sounds like it's still definitely in flux. It's coming together really nicely, but it's not completely done, but it's definitely something you're going to be seeing a lot of in the future. Now, so we've got our firms. It's important to understand a few things about them and understand why they are not, why they don't answer all the questions that one would hope they would answer. The first is that firms are pretty much by nature dated by the time they come out. That's because a flood insurance rate map is based on a flood insurance study. So the flood insurance study happens, then they crunch the numbers and create a map, and that map goes to the community, and then the community reviews it. It goes through several iterations. By the time it's actually approved and active, things on the ground may have changed substantially, or maybe even minorly, but enough to really change the way that your community floods during a major storm event. For example, perhaps you had a dune system that got wiped out by a major hurricane, so an area that was protected is no longer protected. Or perhaps you had coastal protection structures go in, or perhaps they were removed. Whatever else, they're very tricky to keep up to date. And also it's important when you look at the date on your flood insurance rate map to look at the date of the flood insurance study. Because sometimes you get nice new digital maps that are based on older studies. That doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that you need to do them with that in mind. The second thing to consider is that all of these maps are based on models, and models are complex and increasingly powerful and certainly increasingly accurate, but it's certainly not the case that the models themselves will accurately depict all sorts of different storms and all sorts of different situations. I guess it's that old cliche that the map is not the land, and it's good to keep that in mind. Next, firms do not show worst-case scenarios. You know, the storms get much bigger than 100-year events and even bigger than 500-year events. If an area looks to be completely safe from everything on a firm, even from a 500-year event, if you have that map on yours, that doesn't mean it is, of course, absolutely completely safe. Things do get worse. You get the effect of, for example, compounding storms. You get one hurricane coming in quickly after another. Areas that might have been repaired or somehow started to recover, like wetlands, may still be torn up and land may be flooded, so you end up with a storm which causes much more damage than the firm predicted. So definitely keep that in mind. The take-home message of all this, of course, considering developing that area or redeveloping that area. But certainly don't discount it and don't fool yourself into thinking that what you saw happen doesn't really matter if it's not on the official map. There are ways to improve the information that you gather after the storm event, so the sorts of things that give you that key so you know that, hey, this area does flood and this is a problem. And we're going to talk about that some in the fourth webinar in our series. We've got a new tool which we're going to be releasing down in the Gulf of Mexico that should help communities gather information really easily after storm events. But yeah, we'll talk about that in the fourth webinar. Now, throughout the training series here, we're going to be talking about different tools that are out there and are available. Because we don't have unlimited time, we're going to sort of pick tools from different states during different webinars and try to spread it all around. But I do want to point out that there's a lot of information out there from all the different states. And this slide is featuring the Mississippi Geospatial Clearinghouse, which has a lot of data in it. I pulled this one up live online, but it's advanced enough and detailed enough that I think it might really slow it down and wouldn't work very happily. But it is a really, really neat tool. You can zoom way in and you can actually see where buildings are sitting. I'm assuming this is from detailed LiDAR data. And it's a wealth of information that you should keep in mind and use in coordination or in conjunction with your flood insurance rate map. Because, again, this may have more detailed information. The state of Mississippi actually encourages you to use these in addition to your flood insurance rate map. Sometimes you just need information to make an argument. There's a website that there are a few. I'll just show a couple here, but that show the probability of a hurricane striking a particular county during any given year. That's a small one or a major one. This is sort of to counteract, I guess it's the other side of local knowledge. Local knowledge often extends back years and decades, but it doesn't necessarily go back centuries. And sometimes we have good data from centuries that shows that, hey, this building, in theory, looks really safe now, but that major hurricane that went through back in the 20s or back in the turn of the century caused massive amounts of damage. So it doesn't mean that it's safe just because we think it's safe. And even if the firm thinks it's safe, if you look back through your data, you might find more information on that. And this is the sort of tool that helps you make those arguments. And I also want to mention really briefly here a tool that many of you may have heard of called HAZIS. This is FEMA's official methodology for estimating potential losses from disasters. And it's not just for floods or for winds, it also does earthquakes. It's a really neat, really powerful GIS tool. And if you have the capacity to run it and run it thoroughly, it can provide you with some really good information. I do want to provide the caveat that has been jammed into my head by the many people I've talked to who use HAZIS professionally, which is that it's definitely a tool where the quality of the output is directly related to the quality of the input. It does shift with some data included in it, but if you rely exclusively on that, you're likely to get results which would not be nearly as good as if you spent some time adding in the specifics of your community. So not just reliant on sort of basic census data, but if you've got detailed data, you know how buildings are built in your area and you know how high they are and whatever else. If you put that in HAZIS, it can be a great tool. And seems to be under constant ongoing development, and it's free from FEMA. So now we have sort of a general idea, if you've gone through these tools, of perhaps what your community faces, and now we want to drill down a little bit more and look at the specific problems, the specific hazards. One of them, a big one that you're all very familiar with down in the Gulf, is storm surge. And in a simple sense, storm surge is just water being pushed up onto the shore from a storm. It's almost entirely wind-driven. There are some atmospheric pressures considerations, but the meteorologists I talked to assure me that that's a pretty minor part of it. It is something that different scientists have been working to try to predict better and better for a long period of time. And it has now come down to two, well, there are several models, but two you'll hear about most often are SLOSH and ADCIRC. And SLOSH stands for sea level and overland surge from hurricanes. And it's been around for decades. It's a very, very useful tool, and I certainly don't want to discount it at all, but it does have some limitations, including it doesn't look into waves on top of the general water height, and it also doesn't consider rain, and there's some other things. So use it with caution. There's a more advanced tool called ADCIRC, which stands for Advanced Circulation, that looks more holistically at what's happening. It also is a great tool. It's a little bit more complicated and difficult to run, but it's worth your while. If you can get good SLOSH or ADCIRC data, you should definitely take that into account when you're trying to figure out your storm surge. And that's something that is available from a bunch of different places. The Corps of Engineers often has SLOSH data, and there's ADCIRC data out. It'll take a little digging around because it's not necessarily available for everybody in equally high quality. But if your community is looking for it, please let us know. We'll help you try to find it. If you want to look at historic data, which is another useful thing to try to figure out how much surge a major storm will cause you, it's worth checking out the NOAA Tides and Currents page, which you can see there. We've got the URL for here, but it's a really neat way you can look at the historic surge, whatever tide levels happened or surge levels happened during different events back through time. The sea level rise is an ongoing discussion because it goes with climate change, and it's certainly beyond the scope of this webinar to discuss all the intricacies that go with sea level rise or climate change. And whether or not you think it's happening or whatever you think is causing it, it certainly seems to be impacting a lot of communities up and down the Gulf. And I would strongly encourage you to consider at least looking into how it may affect your Gulf community, because some of the Gulf communities up and down the coast are seeing some really, really major changes in relative sea level rise, whether it's because of land subsiding or the seas coming up, whatever it is, definitely worth considering. There are a bunch of neat tools online to look at it, and it's worth spending the time digging into it because it really can help tell you things that otherwise, especially areas that may have been safe forever before, may not be safe in the future. So on the slide here, you can see some links. There's another one which I will add to here later, which is there's some great training that comes from the Coastal Services Center called Climate Adaptation for Coastal Communities, and it's a 3.5-day session where someone from the Coastal Services Center will come out to your community and help you walk through your different options to get a good idea of what problems you may face and what you might be able to do about them. The coastal inundation goes hand in hand with sea level rise. Essentially, coastal inundation is land that used to be dry, but it's no longer dry. It would be nice if we could just figure out where these wet areas would be by looking at what sea levels are at now and adding whatever number you think it might be higher at whatever point in the future, whether it's 6 inches or a foot or 3 feet, and say, okay, that's how high sea levels will be on my map. I can see which areas that would flood. Unfortunately, it's much more complicated than that due to things like changes in erosion rates and changes in vegetation. So as marshes get flooded, if they get flooded too quickly, it kills off all the freshwater plants, they die off, and that area erodes away really quickly, where before it used to be provide a good protective barrier, now it might not. So it's tricky. Coastal Service Center, again, has some great stuff on the Coastal Inundation Mapping Guidebook that's worth checking out. If only it were just water that you had to worry about. Wind, from what I hear from all my homeowner friends down in the Gulf of Mexico, is an ongoing challenge because wind drives up home insurance rates, and it's a very, very damaging force. Of course, as we've all learned over and over again, it's incredibly difficult to tell what was caused by wind and what was caused by water, at least in the eyes of insurance companies. You need to consider both. And the National Weather Service's Hurricane Preparedness website can give you a good general idea of what wind speed will be like in your community during different flood events. I just took a screenshot of it here showing what a Cat 3 looks like. It gives you different rates that are coming through. You can see the top one is showing what it would look like, what sort of wind speed you'd expect with a storm that's going 25 miles an hour versus one that's going 20 miles an hour. That's the forward motion of the storm. And it changes things, and it's worth taking a look at that too. It's especially if there's more detailed stuff in some of your building codes, depending on which building codes your community uses. This is another neat tool I want to show off. This is a way to get your head around the potential hurricane risk. So if I want to see historic hurricane tracks, say, for example, I think it might be safe around this spot in Mississippi. If I click on this button here, it's going to zoom me away, and then it's going to draw all the different historic records it has for different hurricanes that have gone through there. And yesterday, as I was playing with this, I tested all sorts of spots up and down the Gulf Coast, and they all look about like big, scribbly mess of hurricanes ripping through. And you can pick out individual ones and get data on which storm it is and when it happened and everything else. But it's another one of those neat tools to figure out what the real risk is for your community and learn more about hurricanes. Similar to that, little twist on it is the ICAP damage estimator, which is a tool that will let you look back at historic storms. And you can look at individual storms or perhaps a whole year, and it will give you the damage estimated for what happened when it went through, how much it cost then, and how much it would cost now based on inflation and changes in building practices and a bunch of other things. Of course, it's not incredibly precise, and I was sad to find, as I was playing with it last week, that they don't have the 2011 storms in there yet. I'm not sure if they're going to continue to develop this or not, but it is a tool worth looking at. Another great one to look at, and perhaps the most useful of all of them as far as the sheer amount of data, is the digital coast from the Coastal Services Center. Margaret mentioned this earlier on in the talk. Definitely worth a webinar on its own. I just want to spend a couple minutes pointing out a few key features on it. You can see that it does have a whole bunch of data. If you click on the data tab, for example, you can see all sorts of different data that they have gathered together from all over the place. And as far as I can tell, if you're looking for good coastal data, the Coastal Services Center is the best spot to go. And if you can't find it, what you're looking for, don't hesitate to contact them. If they don't have it in there, they may know where you can get it. It's a really, really useful thing. They have different tools available, software you can download for free and use. A really popular one, for example, is this CanViz one, which I'm sure we'll talk about during our outreach session. But it gives you an either different what sea level projections would look like. I believe this photo right here is downtown Charleston, and the top is what it looks like currently, and what if we bump the sea level up 3 feet, what would it look like? It's just a really, really easy tool to use that. I find this in action tab is the last one I'll point out today, but I mean on these different areas you can see what sort of tools are being used along the Gulf Coast. So if we click over on Gallatin, for example, you can bring data tools to the restoration community. Just a quick sort of story about what happened and how these tools have been used. So checking out and spending some time looking at it. A lot of great stuff there. All this information, of course, is only useful if it gets used, and that's the tricky part. If you have it all sitting in a vault in a very nice, safe place, and it doesn't go into decision-making process, and if it doesn't go into different council meetings and whatever else, then it's not doing anybody any good. So make sure that data is available in whatever way you think is best for your community. And traditionally, this meant having it in your city hall. Perhaps that's not the best way anymore. Perhaps it is. Maybe having it in the library is good. Probably having it available on your website is terrifically handy. That may or may not be possible for you, but if you could get minimal stuff up so people have some information some access to information, and also can learn where they can get more information. So if you can't post, for example, your maps online because you don't have a GIS team or someone who's inherently geeky on your staff to work it all out, perhaps you could say, look, we do have these maps available, stop by the City Hall and address it that way. The emergency information you also want to have available for everybody too, and this can get to be kind of tricky. If you don't have this stuff available in a format that everybody can access during a major storm event, it can be pretty bad, and it can really detract on your ability to protect your citizens. I was talking to an emergency manager who was telling me about he went into volunteer after a storm event down in the Gulf in a community that was not his, and he couldn't figure out where anything was because so many of the houses had been wiped away and the street signs were all gone, so his map didn't do him any good. And if you have local knowledge, that's great. And the thing is, they had a tool that could have allowed this guy to walk around with his GIS stuff, but the information was all proprietary and they didn't have the permission set up. Not talking at all or against proprietary information, just that it's good to keep all that stuff in mind and think ahead about how it might be used during a major storm event when you set up your contract and get everything all going. But the last bullet is emphasized deliberately here, and it's about backing up. And this is something near and dear to me because it seems to cause a lot of trouble in a lot of places, and it's easier than ever to get around it. Paper stuff can be tricky if you only have single copies of everything and everything is in one office and you need access to that all the time and your office is in the floodplain. That's difficult. But if you have digital files, all that stuff should be backed up remotely using a public service, a commercial service, whatever you want. It's relatively inexpensive, and you can have all your stuff backed up far, far away. And I would certainly encourage you in this instance to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So I've seen some communities say, well, we'll deal with backing all of our stuff, our digital stuff up after we get all of our paper in the digital form. That could take a really long time or never happen. You're better off just packing up what you have and sort of staying ahead of that game as you continue to add to your digital library. Have all that stuff all available to everybody at all times and completely safe. So that wraps up most of what we're going to talk about today. Just a couple quick thoughts on what to do next. So we're early on into our webinar series. We have several more that are going to continue us forward on this trajectory. For now, perhaps something occurred to you of different activities or actions your community could take. It might be worth listing those things so you can think about them later. Start thinking about potential ways that you can pay for some of this stuff, which includes looking at the StormSmart Coast website for potential resources, and also feel free to post or ask about that on our group, which I mentioned earlier on the StormSmart Connect. If you feel like that you're going to be ready to make a move on this, maybe start to get together the people that you need for part of your team and start assembling that team. We'd certainly encourage you, and we'd love to have you join us for our next session, which will be on March 8th. We will send all of you a thank you for attending, and there will be a link there to sign up for the next one if you would like to, or you can go back to that StormSmart training tab on StormSmart Connect and sign up that direction. We'll be talking then about smart growth and ecosystem services and planning stuff in general, as well as regulations. It should be a really good talk. We've got a great speaker line that has a lot of experience in this field, and it should be able to answer a lot of different types of questions. Also, just head back to StormSmart Coast or StormSmart Connect and get whatever information you need and ask whatever questions you want, and we'll be happy to help out however we can. So at this time, that concludes the presentation part of this. If you have questions, please type them in. And if, depending on how timing works, we can unmute you if we need to clarify any questions that come in. But we would be happy to do our best to answer them. Again, if we have questions we can't get to or that you think of later, please post them over on our StormSmart Connect group. You can also email me directly if you want to at help@stormsmart.org. If you're a bit of a geekier type, you can find us over on Twitter with @StormSmart. Oh yeah, one quick final note. Those of you who are certified floodplain managers with the Association of State Floodplain Managers, you can get CFM CEC credits, continuing education credits, if you'd like to. The link to that, let me jump back over here to StormSmart. So I'm going to go to StormSmart Training. I'll go to the group. And then there's this link right here, the training CECs. You can click on that. It's just a little form you to fill out. It's really basic, your first name, your last name, your email address, and your CFM number. And we will hand that on to the ASFPM staff, and you should get your continuing education credit. So with that, we can take any questions. A huge thank you, Davidson. Also, you can see some of the people who have been working on this, both at Cabinet and our various different agencies that have been helping us out. And of course, a giant thank you to the Gulf of Mexico Alliance Coastal Community Resilience Team, who is instrumental in getting this all happening and providing the support. So,
hey Wes, we do have a couple of questions that have come in here. I can start with one from David Gauth. And David, I can actually unmute your phone, and you're unmuted right now if you want to provide some clarification. But your question was, what are the chances of making the insurance industry use our models of coastal restoration, which reduce risk, with the models that they're currently using, and as a result have been, having higher premiums. David, does that get the gist of your question across, or do you have any clarification you want to offer?
I think so. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. My problem is I know that the insurance industries throughout the Gulf Coast are using models, and based on the past performance, these models show the increased risk they're going to feel like they're going to have in the future. We have used models and state master plans and stuff like that that shows a reduction in risk, and these two industries aren't talking, and that should happen some kind of way.
Yeah, you know what, Dave, I've heard this expressed in a bunch of different states around the country. Do you, by any chance, do you know any of the details on the models that you use and why there's this difference between what they show versus what the industry ones show?
I know they're using different types of models. One familiar one I know is the air model, okay? But, of course, the insurance industry is going to use the model that makes them look the best as far as being able to increase the premiums. And granted, they need to increase premiums, rightly so, but at the same token, they are not using our models that show a reduction in risk in the future based on the restoration progress that we should have. And that's my only concern.
Yeah, that's David. I'm sorry, I missed. Which state are you from?
I'm from Louisiana, a little town called Thibodaux, Louisiana.
Nice. Yes, I think I've been through there once. Well, I'll tell you what, David, if you can please join us on our Louisiana one, we will do our best to track down some answers for that. And I don't know that we'll get a definitive answer. It seems to be an ongoing a bone of contention, but maybe we can get someone who can really talk intelligently to that, and we'd love to know the answer ourselves.
That would be great.
Thanks so much for the question.
Okay.
Wes, we've got another question here. This one's from Deborah Carey, and she was asking if you think that cell phones and MapQuest information could be useful in emergency situations, and if so, how?
That's a great question. So I have to admit that on the side, I try to be an amateur geek, and I play with a lot of this technology a lot of the time, and I think in the end, of course, it will end up being useful. I think in the meantime, we have serious problems with if we only rely on technology and then we lose our cell phone networks or our future wireless networks, whatever we're using. I think this will change quickly, but right now, I would certainly encourage you to have good backup plans and not be 100% reliant on that. Whether it's guessing that perhaps the data plans will go down, so you need to make sure you have everybody's phone numbers, not just email addresses, or vice versa. Sometimes it's much easier to have different easy ways to contact one another through a bunch of different mediums, including, for example, Twitter, which uses very little bandwidth, but has gone down. I don't know if you're a user, but has gone down a lot with things like a big soccer score or something. If there's a big game, Twitter can crash under all the pressure. So I'm assuming with the next major event that comes to the Gulf, we will see perhaps Twitter go down again. So I guess the answer is we're definitely going that way in the future. For now, keep your backup plan.
Thanks, Wes. If anybody else has questions, feel free to type them in, and we'd be happy to have Wes answer them. We've got just a few extra minutes here. Pat Skinner, you've actually got your hand up. I don't know if you have a question, and I can unmute you.
You did.
Pat, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I was typing. I saw your note, and I was trying to type this out. It's I guess there is a question in here, but the gentleman that asked about the insurance company using wind risk that reflects future conditions based on restoration, or it might have been flood conditions, but I think it was wind conditions. What I can contribute to that conversation is that for a long time we've been aggravated with the flood insurance program because they don't use future conditions hydrology in making flood insurance rate maps, and the answer has always been we're not allowed to use future conditions for insurance rating. We could make maps that you could use for regulation that show future conditions, but not for the basis of insurance. And I don't know if that is a legal thing that applies to all insurance rating, that you have to rate your insurance based on the conditions as they are today, and then you can change them later if the conditions change. But that may be the case, and it may explain why they're not considering future conditions, a future improvement or lowering of wind risk in rating wind insurance. So perhaps my question is, can someone verify or find out if it's really a legal requirement of the insurance industry that you rate based on the situation that is today, not on the situation you think you will have in the future?
That's a great question, Pat. Thanks for joining us. From my understanding is that some insurance companies are already are preemptively looking at what conditions will be like in the future, deciding that it looks bad. So they're starting to try to back out of areas which you've seen in the Gulf and actually seen up and down most of the coastlines. So I think they're thinking ahead, but that's worth checking in with someone from the industry. I'll see if I can track that info down.
Thanks.
Wes, we've had a few folks ask about the CEC, continuing education certificate. Could you remind folks how that's going to work?
You bet. So I just switched back over that screen here now, but again, I'll show you how to get there real quickly. You just need to fill out this form, but you can get there by hitting on the StormSmart training button right here up in the tab, which should be on any screen. You come to stormsmart.org. And then you can hit on this big button right here that says join the group, which will take you to the group. And then from the group, the link is right here up top. And it says attended and looking for CEC credit. Head here. If you click on that link, it will load, and all you need to do is fill out just a few basic fields, and we will submit that on to ASFPM, and they've indicated they don't need an external form or anything else. This will do it just with what you've got here.
Thanks a lot, Wes. The last comment that we had was from Ed Thomas, and Ed, I can take you off of mute if you want to provide a little bit of background. I know that your comment was probably longer than I want to read. Can you hear me right now, Ed? I don't know if you're still on the line or if you're on mute.
Charles, while we try to get him on, is there any sort of question there we can try to answer?
Well, I think that one of the other questions that several people have asked. Okay, Ed doesn't have a microphone. The question that a few people have asked is how available these presentations are going to be after the fact, and if people can download the presentation online afterwards.
Absolutely. Yep. We will post it over on that StormSmart group. So we'd love it if you join us, but you know what? You don't need to access it. So where it will be as of tomorrow morning after we get everything all cleaned up, again, go back to that group page. And on the group page, if you click on the document section, there's nothing in there yet, but we will have this uploaded, and you'll be able to access all the links. We'll also go back through and make sure all the links are visible to you for any resources that we shared on here. And please, if you come over to the group and join us, it's a really easy process to join StormSmart Connect. And once you're in, you'll be able to you can share links that you've discovered and ask questions that you have. Until you create an account, there's not much you can do as far as interacting, but fully respect anybody who wishes to not be on there, and we're not going to hold you hostage and not let you chew that document without it. So again, just go to StormSmart Connect for StormSmart Connect group for training and hit that document tab, and it'll be sitting right there.
Thanks, Wes. That hits most of the major questions that we had. There were a few other ones that we were able to respond to folks online, and we're basically out of time here. We got started a few minutes late, but we want to be respectful of people's time too.
Absolutely. I appreciate everybody attending. If there are any more questions, we've got all sorts of different ways to contact us. Please don't hesitate to do so, including over on StormSmart Connect, and we will do our best to either answer your questions directly on here or perhaps or incorporate them into later trainings as we move forward here. So hopefully we'll see or hear or have many of you on the webinar in a couple of weeks. More information is all under that StormSmart training tab on StormSmart Connect. With that, thank you so much, and we'll hope to see you next time.
Thanks.